Hi everybody and welcome to episode 274 of The Art of Procurement. So I'm your host, Philip Heitzen, and I want to thank you, as I do every week, for joining us today. So as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to be able to publish each one of these episodes. And one of the things that really can sometimes take time is getting the approval from corporate communications for when we interview practitioner-side guests. And, it's something that we often need to get before we can hit publish. So unfortunately, the show that we had originally scheduled for today, we've actually had to move up in the calendar because the corporate comms approval didn't come through in time. But worry not. I've been spending a lot of time the past few months working with procurement teams on their transformation journey. That journey from being a tactical function to becoming a strategic one. So this journey, it always must begin by inspiring people on the art of the possible. And, this often has to be members of your procurement team themselves, to rethink the possibilities of what procurement can achieve, but also senior executives and stakeholders and what they can expect from a fully functional procurement team. So today, I'm actually going to share a few ways to really sell the art of the possible to our executive stakeholders and some of the steps to go through to get their buy-in for a procurement change journey. Now, before I go into today's episode, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. And first of all, I just want to thank Tradov for their support of Procurement Thought Leadership and for sponsoring this episode of Art of Procurement. So Tradov eliminates pain points for business buyers and sellers, whether it's purchasing urgency, unaligned buying and selling processes, lack of communication and transparency within their own teams, and difficulties discovering new suppliers. So one of the things you can do with Tradov is actually build your own private network or community portal, and you can do that for free. So for example, you can create a private network within Tradov where your entire procurement team can share information, post thought leadership, and start group discussions. It's a little bit like a hybrid of LinkedIn, Slack, and a wiki page that really brings together all your team communications into one place. Now switch over to the public areas of Tradov, and you'll join a community of over 250,000 buyers and sellers. As a buyer, you can post your supply needs, and Tradov will notify the best suited sellers worldwide. This gives buyers an opportunity to find new suppliers, receive multiple proposals, and become better informed on the market dynamics of that product or service that they're buying. And finally, buyers and sellers then have the opportunity to transact via Tradov's B2B blockchain solution. So to join Tradov for free, whether it's to create your private network for your team or to discover new suppliers for your next sourcing event, just go to artofprocurement.com/Tradov. That's artofprocurement.com/Tradov. I also want to let you know that we've just announced the details of our next AOP Live webinar session. So if you recall, AOP Live is a webinar where really you're in control of the conversation. So we don't have any slides at all. It's like a podcast. It's really like a video podcast where I have a one-on-one interview, only you get to send the questions in advance. And also, as we are going through the webinar, so you get to ask those questions live. Well, on October the 29th, 2019 at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to be interviewing Joe Yakura. Joe is the former CPO of Fannie Mae, Bank of America, and American Express. Joe is also the co-author, along with Robert Hanfield of NC State University, of the upcoming third annual Procurement Data Quality and Governance Report. So we're going to be discussing the findings of the report, along with tips on how you can master the procurement data challenge. And I really want to thank iValuer for making this AOP Live session possible. To register for that, you can actually just go to the link in today's show notes, which is artofprocurement.com episode 274, or go to the landing page for the webinar directly. That's artofprocurement.com/AOP Live Data Challenge. Okay, finally, in terms of housekeeping, I do actually just want to talk a little bit about Art of Procurement and our partners with companies like Tradov and iValuer. So long-time listeners will recall that I've talked in previous pods about our experimentation with sponsorship. And to be honest, it's kind of been a difficult one to know really what is the most appropriate thing to do. The reality is that the Art of Procurement does require a lot of investment to be able to keep publishing every single week. There's a lot of time that goes into each one of these podcasts. But on the other hand, one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is, focusing on providing actionable insights rather than somebody else's marketing collateral. So early in 2019, we developed our first brand partnership program, and included in that was ways that we could work with providers to share their thought leadership through our AOP Live webinar program, through title sponsorship, and to create special series. we actually have our first special series coming next week, and I can't wait to share that with you. I'll just touch on it a little bit at the end of the show today. But as I mentioned before, our aim is to provide content that helps you elevate the role of procurement. So if you ever believe that we're not doing that, I truly want you to let me know, because that's the only way that we really get to know whether what we are doing is valuable or not for you. But everything that we really try and put out there from an art of procurement perspective is truly focused on elevating procurement and helping you drive change within your organizations. Now, for any organizations who are interested in working with us in 2020, whether that's to create content for your channels, to keynote or facilitate events, or to sponsor Art of Procurement, as our title sponsor, just please do let me know, because we're putting the finishing touches on our 2020 brand partnership guide as I speak. All right, well, thank you so much for sticking with me. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I spend a lot of time either directly selling the potential for procurement to non-procurement executives, or helping to prepare and coach procurement leaders in doing the same. And so today I thought I'd share some tips based on my experience on how you can really increase your chances of getting your executive team to buy into and therefore make the necessary investments in a change or transformation initiative. And I really have this kind of bucketed into 6 different steps that you can take. So first of all, really, really important, starting at the beginning, is to really understand and address your current state and also the failures of the past. So I think about this as self-awareness. Really being aware of where you are today is the foundational building block of being able to go on a journey to get to somewhere else. You can do that through executive interviews, through advisory groups or focus groups, for example, stakeholder surveys, lots of different ways that you can solicit feedback. But doing so demonstrates, one, that you want to know, how you have been doing and how you are perceived within the organization. And that lets you know kind of the depth of perhaps the challenges that you have in driving change and in changing the hearts and minds, where to particularly focus on as you're starting your communication around what procurement can do. Just a really good baseline of where are we now so we can figure out where we want to go tomorrow. Now, once you have that self-awareness, the second element is really to look at understanding the business challenges and the opportunities. So this goes a lot broader than just procurement. What as a business are the main challenges that you are faced with? What as a business are some of the things that you are doing to drive growth? Essentially, this is a needs requirement. What does your organization need from a fully functioning procurement organization in the future? That may not be something that your executives particularly know, because that's a journey that you're going to take them on. But you know the right questions to ask to actually start to figure out, okay, these are the challenges, these are the opportunities. Now I've got an idea of what procurement can do to help and how I can position that. So you have the self-awareness, then you have a needs requirement. The third thing I see is really painting the art of the possible. And this is often, I would say that this is often the biggest challenge when working with executives, is really demonstrating what procurement is possible, what procurement can do. What are the different value levers that a fully functioning procurement organization can drive. And why that's challenging is because a lot of executives come to this with predetermined ideas. Now, you may be fortunate that you have executives who have been in an organization where perhaps procurement was more mature than where your organization is, and so they already have got to see what is possible. But a lot of times, they don't really have that insight, and so they look at procurement as being a very tactical function, one that is really just focused on the procure-to-pay process. So with needs assessment in hand, you can then start to paint the art of what is possible and how procurement can address some of those needs and some of those challenges from the organization based on best practices, based on, going beyond kind of the traditional procurement value proposition, I would say, because this is where you start to change. I talked about hearts and minds before. This is where you start to change the hearts and minds and help folks really buy into, what, there is a bigger role in this organization for procurement. We do need help that goes beyond what we thought procurement was able to deliver for us. So in painting the art of the possible, the fourth thing then is to do a gap analysis. Where are you today versus what do you need as a procurement organization tomorrow to be able to execute on the art of the possible? Because the worst thing we can do is paint the art of the possible and then obviously not be able to deliver on it. So that is your essentially the kind of big picture transformation roadmap in terms of, okay, this is where we are, this is where we need to go, these are the steps that we need to take. And those steps can be people, it's kind of cliche, right? But people, the process, the technology. How do we need to focus in all those different areas to close the gap to where we want to be? As we look at that, as you think of the different elements of procurement as well, I think what's really important to say is that you don't need to strive to be the best procurement organization in everything that procurement can do. There are going to be some things that are more important to your organization than others. So it's about kind of looking and saying, okay, in my organization, it's going to be really important that we've got a strong focus on supplier relationship management, let's say. And so we're going to look at supplier relationship management as something that we really want to, when we do our gap analysis, we really want to focus on in the future because that's important to us. There can be other areas that you want to focus on. For example, we want to make the process for buying tail spend as seamless and as smooth as possible so that our stakeholders, our business users don't even need to touch procurement. So then you look at that and say, okay, that's really important to me. But you may look at those and say, that's not really important to me. So you give them, less of an importance as you build that gap analysis. But that's really where you look at it. You're going to find some points that are going to be important to you to really deliver through procurement on meeting those challenges and opportunities that you identified. There'll be some things that just aren't as important. So just kind of look at all that and how it maps out. So with that kind of gap analysis, the fifth area to do in this process is obviously to look at a business plan and the investment that you need to close that gap. But what I would say about that is so often I see business plans for procurement transformation focus solely on cost savings because it's the easy metric to measure. We'll go and say, okay, we want $1 million of investment. We're going to return 5x within 18 to 24 months in cost savings. There's your decision, and we try and map that out as being as easy decision as possible. But the reality is, a lot of times the business isn't necessarily just interested in cost savings, because they're looking at the investments in procurement along with a whole host of other investments that they have the potential to spend their money, other places that they can spend their money. And so cost savings and showing an ROI on that alone maybe is one area where at least you can say this is going to be cost neutral and should be more than cost neutral. But, there are other measures to consider. So efficiency, agility, increasing risk mitigation, things that may be more important to your organization that obviously are levers that procurement can pull. One organization that I know is they're in an industry where their staff, it's very, very hard to get the staff that they need to actually deliver on their value proposition. And those staff are getting more and more expensive because of a talent gap, essentially. And so what's important to them is how many hours can I take away from those really highly paid and difficult to get hold of people so that they can do the job that I'm paying them for instead of them getting in the weeds and doing RFPs and doing supplier management. So that is actually more important to that organization than it is in saving money. So again, it's looking at ROI and measuring that and positioning it in a way that is really going to resonate with the executives as opposed to just assuming it's a simple cash calculation. And then finally, the sixth element is when you're looking at your roadmap, look at it from an incremental perspective. So what are the things that you can do to quickly demonstrate success? Because, you got to remember that a lot of the executives are coming to this with perhaps negative experiences of procurement, or they're kind of they'll believe it when I see it mindset around procurement change, because perhaps they have been sold on procurement change before and it hasn't necessarily met up to their expectations. So as opposed to going in for investment for, one big bang of this is going to be a big multi-year, 2 to 3 year program and it's going to cost me, all these millions of dollars. Let's break that up into 6-month segments. So what is it that I can do with a relatively small amount of investment in the next 6 months to demonstrate change, to demonstrate that this is an investment that's worthy of kind of following up on, and when you go back and ask for more investment to increase the capability of procurement even further, you're doing that based on a successful proof of concept, essentially, or a successful pilot program. So you're looking at, and a good example of this is in technology. So in technology, we often go and look at, I'm going to go and implement a big solution that's going to take me 12 to 24 months to implement, and I'm really not going to start to see my ROI until I'm 2 years in and a lot of money into that process. Whereas there are some really low cost, really easy to implement point solutions, for example, and I'm thinking about upstream, so in the source to contract process, that are around project management, for example, and, procurement project management and sourcing, really low cost, and you can implement them within, 2 to 4 weeks in some cases. Use that to demonstrate, if I just have the tools, if you invest in tools, this is what's possible. That will open up the checkbook for greater investment further along, and it doesn't mean that you have to wait your 2 years for that investment, for technology investment to pay off. So that's something else that I would really recommend to really help drive that change journey. So if I just go and recap, those 6 elements. One is the self-awareness. Then really looking at a needs requirement. So what are the business challenges and opportunities that procurement can support? 3 is painting the art of the possible for our executives, how procurement can support that. Then looking at your gap analysis versus current state, what level of investment is needed to be able to essentially execute on the art of the possible that you've painted. 5th is looking at the business plan and the ROI in terms that are important to the business. And then finally, looking at your roadmap from an incremental perspective. So demonstrating successes quickly to increase confidence that this time it really is different. And then that opens the wallets for you to drive additional investment and additional change, as you go through this transformation journey. Okay, well, that was today's show. So I want to really thank you so much for joining me. If you do need any support in transforming your procurement organization, of course, I would love to hear from you. But next week, I mentioned at the top of the show that we have a special series. So I'm going to be sharing a special 5-part series, and it's in partnership with my friends from Officio. So we've developed 5 15-minute podcasts, and we're going to be publishing each one on a different day next week. So one 15-minute pod every day of next week. The topic is going to be about how a new CPO can maximize the impact of their first 100 days in their new role. Until then, I just hope you have a wonderful week, and I will be back again next week to talk to you again. All right, thanks a lot and take care. Hi there, I want to thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. You can check out all of our back catalogue at artofprocurement.com/podcast, where you can also subscribe to our newsletter to make sure that you never miss an episode. And if you found value in today's show, I'd love if you would tell a peer, or perhaps go and rate and review by going to artofprocurement.com/review. Word of mouth really is the best way to help the podcast grow, and if you're able to do either one of those things, I would truly appreciate it.